Now, why would Bethany Funk be trying every legal avenue possible to avoid going to the courts and telling the courts what she knows about these crimes? Hey everyone, it's Lucky with Unfiltered Lucky. And today I wanted to talk a little bit about this proposed court date for this coming summer, 2024, for Bryan Kohberger in the Idaho 4 case. Now, when I heard this news, I was surprised. I was surprised that they were going to do this trial, as soon as this summer. I really felt like this court date could possibly come in 2025. I felt like it would take a while. So I was surprised to hear that this trial could happen this soon. Now I was pleasantly surprised because I know there's a lot of differences of opinion when it comes to the timing of this court date. But I'm of the opinion that, let's get on with it. A lot of people have said, are they going to be ready for this court date? But the truth is, they're never going to be ready. So it's best to just set a court date and let's get on with it. Let's see the facts. Let's hear the witnesses. And, then we can make a better, decision about how we feel as to whether Bryan Kohberger is guilty or not. Now, the prosecution is proposing that this trial begin in the summer because the students and the faculty will be on summer break. So there'll be less people in the town of Moscow, Idaho, which makes sense because there's about to be a ton of people who descend on this small town. They're going to need lodging, places to eat, parking. There's going to be a lot of traffic. So it makes sense that they would consider this when they're proposing the date of this trial. The people involved in this trial will have to make themselves available this summer. The trial is scheduled for 6 weeks long. So a lot of things have to happen in order for this trial to begin and everything to go along smoothly. Now, a lot of people have asked me, how am I going to feel if Bryan Kohberger is proven, to be guilty? We don't know. The prosecution, they could pull a rabbit out of a hat and say, there it is. There he is. He's guilty. And if that happens, I will be happy for the victims' families, that they might finally get a little bit of closure, that the right individual is being held responsible. I'm not biased towards Bryan Kohberger. I'm not biased towards anybody in this case. I'm just talking and relaying my thoughts about how I see things and about the details of this case, which have either been leaked or, released by law enforcement. So if Bryan Kohberger is found guilty and he did commit these crimes by himself, if he did commit these crimes by himself, there's a much bigger story here. But if he's found guilty, beyond a reasonable doubt, and the prosecution, provides evidence that shows that he committed these crimes, I'll be the first one to make a video and talk about all of the reasons that I was wrong. I just don't believe that Bryan Kohberger committed these crimes. And if he was part of these crimes, I definitely don't believe that he did it by himself. But if the prosecution, pulls a rabbit out of a hat and provides evidence that Bryan Kohberger did commit these crimes, then of course I would accept that wholeheartedly. Now, what happens if Bryan Kohberger is found not guilty? Then what? Then we go all the way back to the beginning and start all over again? Because they don't have any other suspects. At the time of the trial, they're proposing that they're going to knock this house down in just a couple of days. So what if Bryan Kohberger is found not guilty? Then we start from the beginning, but then we don't have the crime scene any longer. A lot of the evidence has been burned through. So then what happens? If Bryan Kohberger's found not guilty, law enforcement has a big problem on their hands. So I think this is going to be a really exciting trial. And, I'm hoping that we have this trial this coming summer. Now, we don't know. It could get pushed out further. It could get pushed out further. So, hopefully this does happen this summer. And we can get down to the bottom of this. Present your information, present your proof, and let's figure this out. Now, something else that I want to talk about is, why is Bethany Funk so adamant that she does not want to testify? Why wouldn't Bethany Funk want to be a part of, getting justice for her roommates who lost their lives? Bethany Funk doesn't want any part of that, which to me seems very strange because there's a lot of inconsistencies around Bethany Funk. There was in the PCA, they barely even mentioned Bethany Funk, which I think that raised more red flags than anything. Law enforcement basically threw Dylan under the bus, but they didn't really release a lot of information about Bethany Funk's statement. Now, an investigator named Richard Batante, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, he's working for Ann Taylor, and he began investigating these crimes as well. And he's the reason that the defense subpoenaed Bethany Funk, because Richard Batante discovered in his investigation that Bethany Funk had talked about what she saw and about what she heard to investigators when she was questioned. And this investigator, Richard Batante, he got information about the statements that Bethany was making to law enforcement, and believes that Bethany was making, statements about what she saw and what she heard. So the defense believes that Bethany Funk has information that could clear Bryan Kohberger's name. That's pretty important. Now, Bethany, it's been reported, like I said, there's a lot of confusion around Bethany Funk because it was reported that Bethany Funk was the one who found the bodies. Yeah, it was reported that Bethany Funk walked upstairs and found the victims. Now, it's also been reported that Bethany Funk never left the first floor. It's also been reported that Bethany Funk never walked up the stairs, that she exited the house through the front door and never saw the crime scene. So that's a pretty drastic, difference. Either she found all the bodies or she didn't see anything at all because she never walked upstairs. So the mystery around Bethany Funk, in my opinion, is what appears to be shady. Now, Bethany Funk, she was subpoenaed to possibly testify at the preliminary hearing. Now, she didn't want to do that. Bethany Funk does not want to go back to Moscow, Idaho, and tell the courts what she knows. Why is that? I get it. I mean, I'm sure that, it would be very emotional for her to return back to Moscow, Idaho. But these were her friends. Why wouldn't she want to return and help get justice for her friends? That just doesn't make sense to me. Why would Bethany fight so hard to quash that subpoena? Bethany's attorney is fighting this subpoena. And now we know that the subpoena was quashed because Bethany and her attorney agreed to do an interview with the defense in Las Vegas, Nevada. Now, why doesn't Bethany want to return back to Idaho? It's also been reported that the judge stated that if Bethany Funk did return back to Moscow, Idaho, that she would not be arrested. Why would she be arrested? I mean, yeah, she never called 911, but why would Bethany Funk be concerned that she may be arrested if she returns back to Moscow, Idaho? This is really strange because, apparently she's one of the surviving roommates. She shouldn't, why would she be worried about getting arrested? Now, this is how messed up our justice system is. Now, because Bethany moved to Las Vegas, Nevada, her attorney is arguing that Ann Taylor, the defense, has no grounds to subpoena Bethany Funk because now she is in Las Vegas, Nevada, and no longer in Idaho. So basically, she's saying, so Bethany's attorney is basically saying that because Bethany's now in Las Vegas, that she shouldn't have to go back to Moscow, Idaho, because she's no longer there. Bethany Funk was in a house in Moscow, Idaho, where 4 people brutally lost their lives. But her attorney doesn't believe she should really have to return back to Moscow, Idaho, because she's in Las Vegas now. How stupid is that? Now, something else that is in the response from Bethany Funk's attorney is Bethany Funk's attorney basically, and in my own words, it's not an exact quote, but basically what Bethany's attorney says in the response to the subpoena is that even if Bethany did have evidence that would clear Brian Kohberger's name, the preliminary hearing wouldn't be the time to disclose that. That should be disclosed at the trial. That's how crazy this justice system is. Basically, even if Bethany knew that Brian Kohberger was innocent, now wouldn't be the time to disclose that. That should have to wait until trial. How ridiculous. That sounds ridiculous. To me, it's crazy that Bethany Funk is doing everything that she can to avoid going back and talking about what she knows about these crimes in court. That's strange to me. She was, and this is just my opinion, but it seems silly to me that these roommates, that Bethany Funk can basically just say, I don't want to testify. I just don't want to. What? It seems strange that Bethany Funk kind of gets to choose whether she wants to testify or not. That's ridiculous. You know, in all honesty, if we're, just my opinion, but if I'm law enforcement and I walk into a house where there's 4 victims who lost their lives in a very brutal manner, and there's 2 other individuals who live in this house who are alive and untouched and possibly holding cleaning supplies, those people, in my opinion, become suspects immediately. But in this case, they just, I guess, get to choose whether they're going to testify or not. Now, in my experience, when someone is trying to avoid talking about what they know, then they're not being truthful. Because why wouldn't, if you weren't involved in these crimes, and I'm not saying that either one of the roommates was involved in these crimes, but if you weren't involved in these crimes and you just happened to be in the house when these crimes occurred, what would be the problem with telling the authorities, what you know in court? What would you have to hide if you didn't have anything to do with these crimes? That's the thing about this Idaho 4 case is, they're asking, they're doing all these things that don't make sense. All these things are happening that don't make sense. And then when you question those things, they look at you like you're crazy. That, to me, it's like Bethany's attorney thinks it's absurd that Ann Taylor would want Bethany to come and tell the truth in court in Moscow, Idaho, in my opinion. That doesn't make sense to me. Why wouldn't you want to go to court and tell the truth? Now, if Brian Kohberger is guilty of committing these crimes, why wouldn't the roommates who were in this house during the crimes want to go to court and get justice for their friends and their friends' families? Everybody has something to hide in this case. And then they wonder why we have questions. Maybe because you're being shady. Maybe that's why we have so many questions. They're trying to feed us this BS. And then they act shocked when people speculate and have questions. It just doesn't make sense. The whole thing with Bethany Funk does not make sense. We're going to definitely continue looking into this because I feel like Bethany Funk knows a lot more than we know about. I feel like law enforcement got a lot of information out of Bethany Funk. So we're going to look into that. I think it's so strange what they're doing with Bethany Funk and the whole, shadiness that surrounds her. But anyway, stay tuned for my next video, and please like and, please follow my channel if you like my content. I really do appreciate it. We'll see you next time.